Welcome to today's Explainer. We're jumping right in to unpack a monumental and honestly highly debated legal milestone, the recent Supreme Court ruling on state transgender sports bans. But look, instead of just reading through dry legal briefs, we're going to explore the broadcasted legal analysis through a very specific human lens, the reported personal story of a high school athlete named Peyton McNabb. Because when we look at how these sweeping legal decisions actually impact individuals on the ground, we can really grasp the true weight of the court's actions. All right, let's dive right into this. To truly understand the sheer complexity of this legal debate, we have to start with the human experience that was highlighted in the broadcast. Think back to about a year and a half ago. The life of Peyton McNabb, a high school volleyball player from North Carolina, changed in an instant. She was severely injured in the head by a spike from a transgender athlete, a biological male playing on the opposing women's team. The broadcast actually noted that the video of this incident was widely circulated online, and it thrust Peyton into a massive national spotlight that she never asked for. Section 1. The athlete's experience. Peyton McNabb's catalyst for advocacy. Now, this intense collision of real-time human events and slow-moving legislation didn't actually start with Peyton. If we track the timeline established in the reporting, the stage for this national showdown was set years ago. 6 years ago, Idaho adopted a law banning transgender athletes from female sports teams. Just a year later, 5 years ago, West Virginia did the exact same thing. So these states really set the stage for a national legal battle long before McNabb was even injured a year and a half ago. Peyton's injury ultimately became a huge focal point for a legal fight that was already brewing across the country, which eventually led us straight to today's Supreme Court ruling. Moving to Section 2, the state law battleground. The broader legal and cultural context. To understand exactly why the Supreme Court's involvement was inevitable here, we have to zoom out a bit. According to legal analyst Jonathan Turley, who spoke on the broadcast, polling shows that nearly 70% of the country is actually in favor of keeping sports limited to biological genders. 70%? So the crucial takeaway here is that we're not talking about a fringe debate. It's an issue with massive public interest and really deep emotional engagement right across the nation. And that widespread sentiment helps explain why state legislatures felt compelled to act in the first place. And wow, did that immense public interest translate into massive legislative action? The broadcast highlighted that roughly 24 states, about 24 in total, have passed laws very similar to those early adopters, Idaho and West Virginia. When practically half the country moves in one specific legislative direction regarding civil rights in sports, it creates a massive state-level battleground. And honestly, this sheer scale is exactly what triggered the necessary intervention by the highest court in the land to step in and provide some clarity. Which brings us to Section 3, the SCOTUS decision, the ruling on state sports bans. All right, here is where we really get into the meat of the legal analysis. Breaking down the majority opinion, reporter Shannon Bream explained that the court basically views sports as a deeply competitive, zero-sum game. The justices reasoned that at almost every turn someone wins and someone loses, right? Every single athlete who makes a team inherently takes a roster spot away from another. Every player who earns playing time reduces the time of a teammate. The broadcast detailed how the justices openly acknowledged the immense effort women and girls put into their sports. Working out in the freezing cold, the blazing heat, early mornings and late nights. Ultimately, the court ruled in favor of allowing Idaho and West Virginia to maintain their laws, arguing that states absolutely have a right to protect these hard-earned, life-changing opportunities for biological females. Zooming out to look at the broader legal consensus from the panel, a few key takeaways really jump out. First, the justices appear to view this primarily as a matter that should be left to the states. Second, and this is a huge legal distinction, they noted that transgender status is not currently treated as a protected class in the same legal sense as race or religion. Analysts even pointed out that justices like Amy Coney Barrett have been pretty outspoken on this. Third, the court explicitly acknowledged biological differences, specifically in the context of sports. And finally, they affirmed that states have a fundamental right to protect equal playing fields for women from the physical advantages of biological males. Let's transition over to Section 4, Title IX and Competition, Federal Civil Rights in the Spotlight. A major focal point of the panel's legal analysis was how the Supreme Court's decision intersected with the long-standing historical precedent of Title IX. According to commentators on the panel, like Carrie Severino and Brett, this ruling strongly reinforces a very specific interpretation, that Title IX was explicitly designed and passed by Congress to protect women based on biological sex. The absolute core of their argument is that the entire purpose of Title IX is to ensure fair competition for biological females, and that allowing biological males to compete against them basically undermines that exact purpose. This actually brings us to a very pointed quote from panelist Carrie Severino. She straight up called the ruling a win for reality. She went on to say, "We can't take the words of the statute and try to redefine them." The panelists argued that the court's decision sends a crystal clear message regarding judicial overreach. In their view, when Congress originally passed Title IX, they totally understood sex to mean biological sex. So the argument presented on the broadcast is that the original intent of Title IX simply cannot be redefined by courts or activists without brand new specific legislative action from Congress itself.
Now for Section 5, Reactions and Future Impact, returning to the human element.
So what does this sweeping legal decision actually mean for the folks on the ground? Well, the broadcast brought the conversation right back to Peyton McNabb to get her personal reaction. She stated simply, "I'm thankful that states are able to protect their girls." McNabb, who even attended the State of the Union address as part of her advocacy work, described the ruling as a complete full circle moment. She expressed deep relief and gratitude, and not just for herself, but for the countless other families, coaches, and daughters who she says have felt totally helpless. For her, this ruling provides the concrete judicial backing necessary for states to implement the protections she feels were missing when she stepped onto that volleyball court.
But hey, a Supreme Court ruling rarely ties up every single loose end, right? As anchor Dana Perino perceptively pointed out during the broadcast, there are still some major, glaring, unanswered questions. While this ruling successfully secures and upholds the laws in states like West Virginia and Idaho, what exactly happens next? Does this ruling only apply to the 24 states that have actively passed bans? Or does it legally prevent other states from legislating in a completely different direction, maybe mandating inclusion based on gender identity? The panel noted they'd have to keep parsing the legal text, but for now, it's definitively clear that states with bans have the legal standing to maintain them. Which leaves us with this final, absolutely vital thought. We've seen how the highest court interpreted the law, and we've seen the very real human impact through the eyes of Peyton McNabb. But the map of the United States, it is still fractured on this issue. So, with the Supreme Court allowing these state laws to stand, how in the world will the remaining states navigate this intense, ongoing collision between biological sports categories, the legacy of Title IX, and the push for transgender rights? Are we going to see a unified national standard emerge, or are we looking at a permanent patchwork of state-by-state rules for student athletes? It's a complex reality that is far from settled. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.